The silence of a $10 million penthouse is a special kind of empty. For Annalise Sterling, it was a cavern of glittering ice. That night, the only sound was the ragged, painful breathing of her 6-month-old son, Derek, and the echo of her husband's parting words. He had stood by the door, dressed in a Tom Ford suit that cost more than her parents' car. His handsome face marred by impatience. She had begged him not to go, not tonight. "He's burning up, Adrian," she'd pleaded. He just adjusted his cufflinks, his eyes as cold as the marble under her feet. "It's just a baby, you'll be fine," he'd said, dismissing her terror, dismissing their son. Then he left the door clicking shut on his way to his mistress, leaving Annalise alone in their gilded cage with a sick child and a shattered heart. She thought that was the worst night of her life. She was wrong. The next morning his boss called and the real nightmare began. Annalise once believed she was living a fairy tale. She'd met Adrian Sterling at a charity gala, a whirlwind romance that felt ripped from the pages of a magazine. He was the golden boy of Sterling and Davenport capital, a rising star in New York's cutthroat world of finance. He was charming, ambitious, and devastatingly handsome. He'd pursued her with a single-minded intensity that left her breathless. He loved her intelligence, he said her sharp wit, her quiet strength. He'd convinced her to put her own promising career in forensic accounting on hold. "I'll build an empire for us, Annalise," he'd whispered against her hair. "You just have to be by my side." And for a while it was perfect. The sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park, the couture gowns, the trips to St. Bart's on a private jet. It was a life of impossible privilege. When their son Derek was born, Annalise thought her world was complete. She had the perfect husband, the perfect baby, the perfect life. But perfection, she was learning, was a fragile veneer. The cracks had started to show slowly. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The business trips extended without explanation. A new scent, a cloying, sweet perfume that wasn't hers, clung to his shirts. When she'd gently questioned him, he'd turned it back on her. It was the stress of the Davenport acquisition, a massive career-defining deal he was spearheading. He accused her of being needy, of not understanding the pressure he was under. He made her feel small, her concerns petty. Tonight, the veneer hadn't just cracked, it had shattered. Derek had been fussy all day, his usual happy gurgles replaced by weak, painful cries. By evening, his temperature was climbing. Annalise had called the pediatrician, who advised a lukewarm bath and careful monitoring, warning her to go to the emergency room if his fever surpassed 104 degrees Celsius. Fear, cold and sharp, had coiled in her gut. She was a new mother, and the responsibility felt immense, terrifying. Adrian had come home just after 8, striding into the apartment, already shrugging out of his work jacket and into a fresh one for his evening out. "You can't go," Annalise had said, her voice trembling slightly. She held Derek close, his small body radiating a frightening heat against her chest. "He's sick, Adrian. Really sick. His fever is 103. Adrian barely glanced at them. He was texting, a small, self-satisfied smirk on his face. She knew who he was texting. Chloe, the impossibly young, impossibly blonde junior publicist from a rival firm. Annalise had seen her name flash on his phone more than once. "He'll be fine," Adrian said, his tone dismissive. "Babies get fevers. It's what they do. The doctor said we need to watch him. I'm scared. What if it gets worse?" I need you here." Her plea was raw, stripped of all pride. He finally looked at her, and his expression was one of genuine annoyance. It was the look of a man whose evening plans were being threatened by a trivial inconvenience. "Annalise, don't be so dramatic. I have an important dinner. It's for the acquisition." "It's business." "Business," she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Your business is named Chloe, isn't it?" His face hardened. The mask of the charming husband fell away, revealing the cold, ruthless man beneath. "My business is none of your concern. Your job is to handle this." He gestured vaguely towards the whimpering baby in her arms. "It's just a baby. You'll be fine." The words hit her harder than a physical blow. It's just a baby. Her entire world, the tiny, perfect human she had created, reduced to an inconvenience. "You'll be fine." An order, not an assurance. "Please, Adrian," she whispered one last time, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't leave me alone tonight." He didn't respond. He simply walked to the door, opened it, and left. The heavy, sound-proofed door clicked shut, sealing her inside the silent, opulent prison he had built for her. The silence was deafening, broken only by Derek's labored breaths. Annalise sank onto the plush white sofa, pulling her sick child tighter, and for the first time in her marriage, she felt a profound, bottomless hatred for the man she had promised to love forever. She was alone, and the long, terrifying night was just beginning. The hours after Adrian left bled into a nightmarish crawl. The sprawling penthouse, usually a symbol of success and security, felt like a vacant museum. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist into a menacing shape. Annalise's world shrank to the small, hot body in her arms, the digital display of the thermometer, and the frantic pounding of her own heart. She gave Derek the lukewarm bath as the pediatrician had instructed. He cried weakly, his little limbs limp in the water. She dried him gently with a soft towel, dressed him in a light onesie, and tried to get him to take some formula, but he refused, turning his head away with a pained whimper. His fever was holding steady at 103.5 degrees Celsius. Around midnight, a wave of pure panic washed over her. What if she was missing something? What if this wasn't just a simple fever? Her mind, usually so sharp and analytical from her accounting days, was a fog of exhaustion and fear. She tried calling Adrian. The first time it rang and rang before going to voicemail. "You've reached Adrian Sterling. I'm unavailable right now, but your call is important to me. Leave a message." A lie. Her call was clearly not important to him. She tried again 10 minutes later. This time it went straight to voicemail. He had either turned his phone off or blocked her number. The realization was a fresh stab of pain. He was with Chloe, laughing, drinking, wrapped up in a world where she and their sick son didn't exist. She imagined them at a chic Soho restaurant, his hand on her back, his charming smile deployed for someone else. The image fueled a cold, hard anger that began to solidify over her fear. At 2:15 a.m., the nightmare intensified. Derek let out a sharp, piercing cry that jolted Annalise from a half-doze on the nursery floor. She scrambled to his crib. He was shaking, his eyes rolled back slightly, his small body convulsing. A febrile seizure. The pediatrician had mentioned it as a possibility, a rare but terrifying side effect of a rapidly spiking fever. "Oh God, no, no, no!" Annalise chanted, scooping him up. His body was stiff, his back arched. It only lasted for 30 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When it was over, he went limp in her arms, his breathing shallow, his face pale. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the diaper bag, her purse, and her keys, wrapping Derek in the thickest blanket she could find. She didn't even bother changing out of her tear-stained silk pajamas. As she rushed through the living room, she fumbled for her phone to call an Uber, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock the screen. Her gaze fell on Adrian's home office, the door slightly ajar. A single lamp was on, illuminating the mess on his mahogany desk. For a fleeting second, she felt a surge of rage so potent it almost buckled her knees. He was out with his mistress while his son had a seizure. The injustice of it was a physical weight. Her eyes caught on a stack of papers near his laptop. On top was a file labeled Davenport Akiak, Project Nightingale. Nightingale? It sounded so delicate, so innocent. Beneath it, she saw ledgers and bank statements for a holding company she'd never heard of, Nightingale Holdings, LLC. In her pre-marriage life, she'd spent years untangling corporate structures just like this. Even in her panicked state, her old instincts flared. Something felt off. But there was no time. Derek whimpered again, a sound that snapped her back to the horrifying present. She raced out of the apartment, the Uber waiting downstairs. The ride to Lenox Hill Hospital was a blur of city lights and silent prayers. At the emergency room, she was a frantic pajama-clad mother clutching her pale son. The nurses and doctors were swift and professional, whisking Derek away to a pediatric bay. They asked for his father's contact information. He's unavailable. Annalise said the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. For the next 4 hours, she sat on an uncomfortable plastic chair under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital, a lone figure in a sea of other people's private emergencies. They stabilized. Derek brought his fever down with medication and assured her that febrile seizures, while terrifying, were often not as dangerous as they looked. He would need to be observed for the rest of the night, as the first grey hints of dawn broke over the city. Annalise sat by Derek's hospital crib, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in 12 hours. The fear had subsided, replaced by an exhaustion so deep it felt bone-marrow deep. But beneath the exhaustion was something else, something new and unyielding. It was a cold, quiet resolve. The love she'd had for Adrian, eroded over months of neglect, had been burned away completely in the crucible of this one night. She looked at her beautiful, vulnerable son, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would never ever depend on his father for anything again. The fairy tale was over. The cage was unlocked, and she was about to walk out. Dawn in a hospital is a sterile, hopeful thing. The sky outside the window shifted from bruised purple to a soft, promising grey. Derek was finally sleeping soundly, his temperature a stable 99.5 degrees. A nurse had brought Annalise a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt plastic, but she cradled it in her hands as if it were a lifeline. The adrenaline from the night had worn off, leaving behind a hollowed-out calm. She had survived. More importantly, Derek had. She checked her phone. Still no messages from Adrian. Not a single missed call. It was almost 7:30 a.m. He was likely still asleep, probably in Chloe's bed, oblivious to the terror his family had endured. The thought didn't even spark anger anymore, just a profound, empty disappointment. It was confirmation of a truth she had long tried to deny. She was utterly alone in her marriage. She scrolled through her contacts, her thumb hovering over her lawyer's name. It was time. There was nothing left to salvage. She was composing a text message, the words, "I need to file for divorce," stark on the screen, when her phone began to ring. The screen lit up with a name she didn't expect, Arthur Davenport. Arthur Davenport was the senior partner of Sterling and Davenport Capital. He was a legend on Wall Street, an old money patriarch in his late 60s, with a reputation for ruthless business acumen and unshakable personal integrity. Annalise had only met him a few times at formal company events. He was always polite, but distant, his piercing blue eyes seeming to see more than you wanted them to. He was Adrian's boss, his mentor. Why would he be calling her personal cell phone at 7:30 in the morning? Her first thought was that something had happened to Adrian, an accident. A part of her, a vestige of the woman who had once loved him, felt a flicker of alarm. She answered, her voice raspy from lack of sleep. "Hello, Annalise. It's Arthur Davenport. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." His voice was deep and grave, exactly as she remembered it, but there was an undercurrent of urgency that set her on edge. "Mr. Davenport." "No, it's all right. Is everything okay? Is Adrian with you?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No, he is not. And that's part of the reason I'm calling. I was trying to reach him all night. His phone is off. Do you happen to know where he is?" The question was a loaded one. Annalise's mind raced. Should she cover for him? The instinct born of years of being a supportive wife was to say he was tied up to protect their image, but the image was a lie, and she was done upholding it. She took a breath, the cold hospital air steadying her. "No, Mr. Davenport, I don't. He told me he had an important business dinner last night and left around 8:30 p.m. I haven't heard from him since." She chose her words carefully, omitting the part about Chloe, sticking only to the indisputable facts. Another pause longer this time. She could hear the faint sound of papers rustling. A business dinner. Mr. Davenport repeated his tone, laced with something she couldn't quite decipher. Disbelief. "Annalise, there was no company dinner last night. The final signing for the acquisition isn't until tomorrow morning. Last night was the last chance for final due diligence. Adrian was supposed to be in the office running the final numbers. He's missed a critical deadline." Annalise's blood ran cold. He hadn't just lied to her about being with Chloe. He had lied about his work, jeopardizing the biggest deal of his career. The deal he'd used as an excuse for his neglect for months. I didn't know," she stammered, feeling a strange sense of vertigo. "I'm aware of that," Mr. Davenport said, and his voice softened slightly, becoming almost paternal. "Annalise, the reason I'm calling you is not just to find my errant senior VP. I'm calling because I believe you may be in a position to help me with a delicate corporate matter. A matter that involves your husband directly." Her mind flashed back to the file on Adrian's desk. Project Nightingale, the strange holding company. The pieces started to click together in her head, forming a picture she didn't want to see. Her training dormant for years kicked in. Shell corporations missed deadlines, a boss calling the wife. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was something much bigger, much more dangerous. What kind of matter, she asked, her voice now steady, the fatigue replaced by a sharp, focused alertness. "It's not something I can discuss over the phone," he replied. "I know this is highly unusual, but would it be possible for you to meet with me this morning, as soon as possible? My car can be wherever you are in 20 minutes. She looked at Derek, sleeping peacefully in his little hospital bed. He was safe now. He was her priority. But protecting him also meant securing their future, a future that was now inextricably linked to whatever Adrian had done. She had to know. "I'm at Lenox Hill Hospital with my son," she said, her voice firm. "But he's stable. Give me an hour. Send the car. Where are we meeting? Not the office, he said quickly. Too many eyes and ears. There's a private suite at the Carlisle. I'll text you the details. Annalise, thank you. You might be the only person who can help untangle this. He hung up. Annalise stared at her phone, the screen dark. Her world had tilted on its axis. Last night she was a wronged wife, a scared mother. This morning she was something else entirely. She was a woman with a choice, standing at the precipice of a conspiracy she was just beginning to understand. The call wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The Carlisle Hotel was an icon of discreet old-world luxury, a world away from the sterile reality of the hospital. A black town car sent by Mr. Davenport had whisked her from Lenox Hill to the hotel's private entrance. She had managed to convince a kind nurse to watch over Derek for a couple of hours, promising to be back before he even woke up, dressed in borrowed scrubs from the hospital's supply closet. The only clean clothes available, she felt utterly out of place, walking across the marble lobby. Arthur Davenport was waiting for her in a penthouse suite that overlooked the park, the same view as her own apartment, but from a different, more somber angle. He wasn't the intimidating corporate titan she remembered. He was a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was dressed in a simple grey suit, his tie loosened, and he greeted her not with a handshake, but with a concerned look. Annalise, thank you for coming. Please sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee, tea. Hadi, coffee would be wonderful. Thank you, she said, sinking into an armchair that was probably worth more than her entire college tuition. He poured her a cup himself, his movements slow and deliberate. First he set his piercing blue eyes meeting hers. How is your son? The genuine concern in his voice almost undid her. He's fine. He will be fine. It was a febrile seizure, but the doctors say he's recovered well. Davenport nodded, a grim look on his face. I am truly sorry you had to go through that alone. Adrian should have been there. It wasn't an accusation, but a simple statement of fact. He let the silence hang in the air for a moment before getting to the point. He opened a leather-bound folder on the coffee table between them. Annalise, when we brought Adrian on as a partner track VP, we did a thorough background check. On him and on you. Annalise stiffened. On me? Of course, he said, calmly. The spouse of a key executive is part of the package. We need to know there are no liabilities. Your file was frankly more impressive than his. First in your class at Wharton, a rising star at Deloitte in their forensic accounting division. You uncovered the medtech fraud scheme of 2018. The partners there were devastated when you left. She stared at him, stunned. Adrian had always downplayed her past career, framing it as a little job she had before she met him and her real life began. He had made her feel as if she'd been a competent but unremarkable analyst. To hear her accomplishments laid out so plainly by a man like Arthur Davenport was jarring. I gave that up, she said quietly. For my family. I know Davenport said, his gaze unwavering. And Adrian knew exactly what he was convincing you to give up. He didn't marry a beautiful socialite, Annalise. He married one of the sharpest financial minds I've ever seen on paper. And I believe he's been using that fact against you. He pushed a document across the table. It was a flowchart of interconnected companies. At the center was the Davenport acquisition, their main target. Branching off it were several smaller entities, and there at the bottom was a name that made her breath catch in her throat: Nightingale Holdings, LLC. Project Nightingale, as Adrian, so poetically named it, is a ghost. Davenport explained, his voice low and intense. It's a shell corporation he set up 6 months ago, registered in Delaware, with further ties to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. He's been using the acquisition as cover. Over the last few months, he has systematically siphoned nearly $15 million from our firm. Annalise felt the blood drain from her face. Embezzlement. It was so much worse than she had imagined. How she whispered, her analytical mind already tracing the potential pathways. By creating fraudulent invoices for consulting services and due diligence expenses related to the acquisition, Davenport continued, the invoices are submitted by Nightingale Holdings and paid out by our accounts department. Adrian is the one who approves the payments. He's been cooking the books, burying the expenses within the multi-billion-dollar transaction, hoping no one would notice a few million here and there. But the audit trail... Annalise began, her old instincts taking over. Someone would eventually find it. Exactly, Davenport said, leaning forward. And he has a plan for that, too. He's fabricated a digital trail to frame a junior analyst in his department, a young man named Kevin Lynn. All the transfers from a technical standpoint appear to originate from Kevin's workstation. Adrian's plan, we believe, was to let the acquisition close tomorrow, then disappear. By the time our quarterly audit uncovered the discrepancy, he'd be long gone, and an innocent kid would take the fall. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just a cheater and a liar. He was a predator. "Why are you telling me this?" Annalise asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because he got sloppy." Davenport said, a flicker of anger in his eyes. Last night was his last chance to clean the slate, to finalize the falsified records before the deal closed. But he wasn't in the office. He was, as you know, otherwise engaged. He left his work computer on, logged into the network. Our IT security flagged an unusual remote login attempt to his files early this morning from an unauthorized IP address. My CIO woke me up at 4 a.m. We started digging. What we've found is damning, but it's incomplete. The final piece of the puzzle, the physical ledger that connects Nightingale Holdings directly to him and his offshore accounts, is not in his office. He paused, his gaze locking with hers. We believe it's in his home office, in your apartment. Annalise's mind flashed again to the desk. The file, the sense that something was wrong. He must have brought it home to work on last night before Chloe's allure proved too strong. The arrogance of it, to leave evidence of a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme lying around his home. You're the only one who can get it without tipping him off, Davenport stated simply. He's betrayed this company. He's betrayed an innocent employee and Annalise. He has betrayed you and your son in the most profound way possible. I am asking you not as Adrian's wife, but as the brilliant forensic accountant I know you are, to help me stop him. The room was silent. Annalise looked out the window at the city, her city. The life Adrian had given her was a lie funded by theft. The security he promised was a phantom. But her mind, her skills, those were real. He had tried to bury that part of her, but it was still there, sharp and ready. She thought of Derek sleeping in the hospital. She thought of Adrian's cold, dismissive words. It's just a baby. You'll be fine. She turned back to Arthur Davenport, the last vestiges of the frightened, dependent wife, gone forever. In her eyes was a fire he had not seen before, but had gambled on finding. Tell me exactly what you need, she said, and I'll get it for you. Returning to the penthouse was one of the hardest things Annalise had ever done. The black car dropped her back at Lenox Hill, where she spent a precious hour cuddling a now awake and cheerful Derek, his fever gone, his smile returning. The hospital officially discharged him, and Annalise, holding her son, felt a surge of strength. This was for him. The plan she had formulated with Arthur Davenport was simple in its concept, but terrifying in its execution. She was to return to the apartment and act as if nothing was wrong other than being the rightfully upset wife. Her one and only goal was to locate and secure the Nightingale ledger, the physical book of records that would be Adrian's undoing. Davenport's security team had confirmed Adrian's credit card was used at 4 a.m. for a room at the Baccarat Hotel, Chloe's usual haunt. He was still there, likely sleeping off his night of debauchery. This gave Annalise a window. As the elevator ascended to the penthouse, her heart hammered against her ribs. She was no longer just a wife returning home. She was a Trojan horse, an agent of justice walking into the heart of the enemy's camp. She unlocked the door, the familiar click echoing with new meaning. The apartment was pristine, silent, and cold. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off glass and chrome, illuminating a life that was a complete fabrication. She put a sleeping Derek down in his crib, her movements quiet and deliberate. Then she went to Adrian's office. The room was just as she had seen it in her panicked rush hours earlier. The desk was a controlled chaos of files and tech. Her eyes immediately scanned for the ledger. Davenport had described it as a simple black moleskin notebook. Adrian's analog affectation, a place he kept key numbers and transfer codes, believing it was safer than any digital file. It wasn't on the desk. It wasn't on the shelves lined with leather-bound law books he'd never read. She checked the drawers. The first was full of expensive pens and stationery. The second held personal effects, cufflinks, old photos, a spare watch. The third was locked. Of course. Panic began to prickle at the edges of her calm. She didn't have a key. Adrian kept it on his person at all times. She could feel the precious minutes ticking away. She ran her fingers along the edge of the drawer, her mind racing. In her old job, she'd learned that corporate criminals were often undone by simple human arrogance and laziness. Adrian was both in spades. Where would he hide a key? Not somewhere clever. Somewhere convenient. She looked around the office. Her eyes landed on a heavy, ornate silver picture frame on the desk. It held a photo of her and Adrian on their wedding day, smiling blissfully unaware of the future. He loved that photo, seeing it as a testament to his success, the beautiful wife, the perfect life. With a surge of bitter irony, she picked it up. She felt a slight bulge in the velvet backing. She carefully pried the back off. Taped to the inside was a small silver key. Her hands trembled as she inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. She pulled the drawer open, and there it was, a plain black moleskin notebook. She opened it. The pages were filled with Adrian's neat, precise handwriting. It was all there. Dates, transfer amounts, codes, and names of offshore banking contacts. Cross-referenced with the digital evidence Davenport's team had, this was the smoking gun. This was the nail in Adrian's multi-million-dollar coffin. She took out her phone and with steady hands photographed every single page, creating a digital backup as Davenport had instructed. Then she tucked the original ledger into the bottom of Derek's diaper bag, hiding it beneath a layer of diapers and baby wipes. No one would ever look there. Just as she slid the empty drawer shut and relocked it, placing the key back in its hiding spot, she heard a sound that made her blood freeze, the chime of the private elevator arriving at their floor. He was back. She hadn't expected him this early. Her window had just slammed shut. She raced out of the office, her mind a whirlwind. She had to appear normal. She smoothed her hair, took a deep, shuddering breath, and tried to compose her face into a mask of weary anger, the face of a wife who had been up all night with a sick child. The apartment door opened, and Adrian walked in. He looked tired, his expensive suit rumpled. He had the gall to be holding a peace offering, a large coffee from her favorite cafe, and a bag of croissants. "Annalise," he began, his voice attempting a tone of gentle contrition. "Look, I know you're angry. I'm so sorry about last night. Things with the deal got out of hand. I should have called." She stared at him, at his handsome, lying face. She thought of Derek's seizure, of her terror in the hospital, of the innocent Kevin Lynn, who was about to have his life ruined. She thought of the ledger hidden not 20 feet away in their son's diaper bag. Out of hand, she repeated her voice, dangerously quiet. "You have no idea." He frowned, his practiced apology faltering in the face of her cold fury. "Come on, honey. Don't be like this. I was working. For us. For our future." He gestured with the coffee. "I brought you breakfast." Annalise let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of any humor. "You think a croissant fixes this, Adrian? You think you can just walk back in here and fix everything with breakfast?" This was the moment. The plan was for her to leave the apartment with Derek and the bag and meet Davenport's contact downstairs. But Adrian was here now, blocking her path, trying to placate her with pathetic gestures. She had to play her part perfectly. "Where is Derek?" he asked, a flicker of what might have been genuine concern in his eyes. "Is he okay?" "He's fine," she said, her voice like ice. "No thanks to you. We spent the night at Lenox Hill. He had a seizure, Adrian." The color drained from his face. "What a seizure. Why didn't you call me?" "I tried," she said, letting all the bitterness of the night pour into her words. "Your phone was off. You were too busy with your business dinner." He looked genuinely shaken, a crack in his armor of arrogance. "Annalise, I didn't know. I swear, it doesn't matter anymore," she said, walking over to the diaper bag and slinging it over her shoulder. She moved towards the nursery. "I'm taking Derek to my mother's for a few days. I can't even look at you right now." It was the perfect excuse. He would see it as a wife needing space, not as a woman carrying the evidence that would destroy him. "Wait. Annalise, let's just talk about this," he pleaded, following her. She picked up her sleeping son from his crib, the weight of him a comforting anchor in the storm. "There's nothing to talk about, Adrian," she said, turning to face him, her eyes hard as diamonds. "You made your choice last night. Now I'm making mine." She walked past him, heading for the door, the diaper bag containing his doom slung over her shoulder. The fate of millions of dollars of multiple lives was hidden between the diapers and the Desitin, and the architect of the crime had no idea he had just been checkmated. The air in the penthouse was thick with a tension that felt physically suffocating. Adrian, for the first time since she'd known him, looked completely wrong-footed. Her cold fury was something he couldn't charm, bully, or buy his way out of. He saw his control slipping, and it made him desperate. "Don't walk away from me, Annalise," he said, his voice taking on a harder edge as he followed her to the foyer. He moved to block the door. "We are not doing this. You are not taking my son and running off to your mother's." My son. The possessive pronoun after a night of utter abandonment was so audacious it almost made her laugh. Annalise held Derek tighter and faced him down. "Get out of my way, Adrian." "No," he said, his face twisting into an ugly sneer. "You've had your little tantrum. You made your point. I screwed up. I'll buy you a new piece of jewelry. We'll go to Paris. Just stop being so hysterical." It was his fatal mistake. The condescension, the belief that she could be bought, that her legitimate pain was mere hysteria, solidified her resolve into something unbreakable. "It's over, Adrian," she said, her voice chillingly calm. "And not just because of Chloe. Not just because you left your son when he was sick. It's over because of Project Nightingale." The name hit him like a physical blow. All the color drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly pale shock. The arrogant posture collapsed, and for a fleeting second she saw pure animal panic in his eyes. What did you just say?" He stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "Nightingale Holdings, LLC." She continued, pressing her advantage. "The fraudulent invoices, the $15 million you siphoned from your own company, the plan to frame Kevin Lynn for your crimes. Did you really think you were smart enough to pull it off? Did you really think I was stupid enough to never find out?" He stared at her, his mind clearly racing, trying to figure out how she could possibly know. He glanced frantically toward his office. "You went in my office. You went through my things." It wasn't a question. It was a horrified accusation. "You left the evidence of your fraud in a house with a forensic accountant." "Adrian," she retorted, "that's not me being clever. That's you being an arrogant, sloppy fool." His panic began to morph into rage. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he snarled, taking a step toward her. "You have no proof." "Don't I?" she said calmly. She adjusted the diaper bag on her shoulder, patting it lightly. "It's amazing what you can fit in one of these. Diapers, wipes, a pacifier, and a little black moleskin notebook that details every single illegal transfer you've ever made." His eyes darted to the bag, and then back to her face, a look of complete and utter disbelief dawning. He lunged for the bag. "Give me that." Annalise sidestepped him, her heart leaping into her throat. This was the moment she had feared. But just as he reached for her, a sharp, authoritative rap echoed from the front door. Adrian froze. They both stared at the door. "Who is that?" He hissed, his eyes wide with fear. "I imagine," Annalise said, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her, "that it's your boss. And perhaps a few of his friends." On cue, a key turned in the lock, a master override key that only building security, and apparently Arthur Davenport, had access to. The door swung open. Arthur Davenport stood there, flanked by two stern-looking men in dark suits who were clearly not corporate lawyers. Behind them stood two uniformed NYPD officers. Davenport's eyes fell first on Annalise and a sleeping Derek, his expression softening with relief. Then his gaze shifted to Adrian, and it turned to stone. Adrian Davenport said, his voice booming with cold authority in the silent foyer. "Your little project is over." Adrian looked from Davenport to the police officers, his face a mask of crumbling bravado. He was trapped. He turned his desperate, furious gaze back to Annalise. "You did this," he whispered, his voice dripping with venom. "You, my own wife. You stopped being my husband last night when you walked out that door. Annalise replied, her voice clear and strong. You said, it's just a baby, you'll be fine. Well, Derek is fine. And I am more than fine. I am free. One of the detectives stepped forward. Adrian Sterling, you are under arrest for suspicion of grand larceny, embezzlement, and wire fraud. As the officer began to read him his Miranda rights, Adrian's facade finally shattered completely. The charming millionaire, the Wall Street titan, vanished. In his place was a common criminal, cornered and pathetic. He didn't resist as they cuffed his hands behind his back, his expensive suit now the uniform of a fallen man. They led him out of the apartment, past the marble tables and the priceless art he had acquired with stolen money. His last look was at Annalise, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. It didn't touch her. She felt nothing but a vast, cleansing relief. Arthur Davenport walked over to her. The car is waiting for you downstairs, he said gently. My security will escort you wherever you need to go. You and your son are safe now. Annalise nodded, tears finally welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of release. Thank you, Arthur. No. Annalise, he said, looking at her with profound respect. Thank you. You did the right thing. The brave thing. She looked down at Derek, sleeping peacefully in her arms, completely unaware that his entire world had just been irrevocably changed for the better. She had walked into this apartment, a prisoner. Now she was walking out a survivor, her child in her arms, and the key to her new life hidden in a diaper bag. The gavel fell in the hushed wood-paneled courtroom, the sound echoing with a finality that seemed to shake the dust from the air. 6 months to the day after Adrian had walked out on his family, his fate was sealed. Annalise sat in the back row, a lone figure in a simple navy dress, having slipped in unnoticed after the proceedings began. She hadn't come for revenge or spectacle. She had come for closure, to witness the final definitive end of the life she had escaped. Adrian stood before the judge, a shadow of the man he once was. The impeccable Tom Ford suits were gone, replaced by a standard-issue jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His charismatic confidence had evaporated, leaving behind a sallow, bitter resentment. When the judge sentenced him to a term of 7 to 10 years in a federal correctional institution, he didn't flinch. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. But as they led him away, his eyes scanned the gallery and found hers. For a moment, she saw a flicker of the man she married, a desperate, pleading look. But it was immediately swallowed by the now familiar, venomous hatred. Annalise met his gaze without malice, her expression one of serene, sorrowful finality. Then she turned and walked away, leaving the ghost of Adrian Sterling to fade into the annals of courtroom history. Her new life hadn't begun today. It had begun the moment she walked out of that penthouse. The weeks following Adrian's arrest had been a whirlwind of methodical dismantling. She'd hired movers not to pack, but to help her sort. She walked through the cavernous closets, filled with couture gowns and designer shoes, touching the fabrics that had once felt like a costume for a role she was playing. She left them all behind, along with the glittering jewels and extravagant gifts he had used to placate her. They were artifacts of a life that wasn't hers, paid for with stolen money and lies. She packed only her books, Derek's belongings, personal photos from before her marriage, and a few simple outfits. As she stood in the empty living room for the last time, the sunlight glinting off the bare marble floors, she felt not loss, but a profound lightness, as if she had shed a heavy, suffocating skin. She and Derek stayed with her mother in Connecticut for a month. It was a time of healing and quiet rebuilding. Her mother, a practical woman who had always viewed Adrian with a healthy dose of skepticism, didn't say "I told you so." Instead, she simply made tea, held Derek, while Annalise cried the last of her tears, and offered the steady, unspoken support that Annalise desperately needed. "That man built you a palace, honey," her mother had said one evening as they watched the sunset from the back porch. "But he forgot to give you the key. You were always meant to build your own house." The call from Arthur Davenport came during that time, and the job offer felt less like a lifeline and more like a homecoming. Her first day at Sterling and Davenport was daunting. Whispers followed her down the hall. She was the scorned wife, the whistleblower. But that changed the moment she stepped into her first board meeting. Armed with a comprehensive plan to overhaul the company's risk management protocols, she spoke with a clarity and authority that silenced all speculation. She wasn't Adrian Sterling's ex-wife. She was Annalise Thorne. She had taken back her maiden name, a formidable professional with an unparalleled mind for numbers and an unshakable ethical compass. Her greatest satisfaction came from mentoring her new team, especially a young, brilliant analyst named Kevin Lynn. He had been quiet and timid at first, still shaken from being the designated scapegoat in Adrian's scheme. One afternoon, he stopped by her office. "Ms. Thorne," he began, fidgeting with a report. "I just wanted to thank you. You didn't just save my career. You saved my family's reputation, my future. If there is ever anything I can do." Annalise offered him a warm smile. "You're already doing it, Kevin. Your work on the quarterly projections was outstanding. Just keep doing what you're doing. Integrity and hard work are the only currency that matters in the end. Let that be the lesson from all of this." Kevin nodded, a new confidence in his eyes. In helping him, Annalise felt she was actively repairing the damage Adrian had left in his wake, turning his destructive legacy into something positive. Now home was a 3-story brownstone on a leafy street in Park Slope. She'd bought it with the clean money from her divorce settlement and the signing bonus from her new job. It had high ceilings, a small garden out back, and a beautiful bay window in the living room that was perfect for reading stories to an increasingly active Derek. The silence here wasn't the cold, empty silence of the penthouse. It was the warm, peaceful quiet of a home filled with love, punctuated by the happy squeals and babbling of her son, who was now taking his first wobbly steps. Some days, she took the subway to work anonymous in the bustling morning crowd, and felt more powerful than she ever had in the back of a chauffeured town car. Her life was her own, every small piece of it earned and cherished. She even saw an article online one day about Chloe, who had attempted to rebrand herself as a wellness influencer. The comments section was a brutal reminder that the internet never forgets, and her career pivot quickly fizzled out. Annalise felt a brief, detached pity for the girl before closing the tab. Chloe was a ghost from a different life, irrelevant to her new reality. This evening, as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Annalise sat on the floor of her living room, stacking blocks with Derek. He clapped his hands in delight as the tower grew, then knocked it down with a gleeful shriek. His laughter was the only music she needed. She thought back to Adrian's cruel, dismissive words that had been the catalyst for her transformation. "It's just a baby, you'll be fine." He had been so spectacularly wrong. Derek wasn't an inconvenience. He was her anchor, her motivation, her North Star. And she wasn't just fine. She was whole. She was happy. She was free. She had faced down the millionaire, the manipulator, the monster who lived in the gilded cage, and had discovered that the key was inside her, all along. Looking at her son, her beautiful, thriving boy, she knew she hadn't just built her own house. She had built her own world. And it was magnificent. And so Annalise Sterling closed the chapter on a life that was built on lies and opened a new one written in her own ink. Her story isn't just about the downfall of a cheating criminal husband. It's a powerful testament to the hidden strength that lies within us, waiting for the right moment to emerge. It's a reminder that the most gilded cages are still cages, and that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in integrity, courage, and the freedom to build a life on your own terms. She didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed her identity, her career, and her future, proving that the most powerful response to betrayal is to build a better life without the person who broke your heart. What did you think of Annalise's ultimate decision? Was she right to team up with her husband's boss? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of resilience and empowerment, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for listening.